Hello and welcome to the Linguapop podcast. Today we are discussing the popular culture of Spanish-speaking countries and about the role of Quechua culture across the Spanish-speaking world. I'm Gavin and today we have Ella.
Hi guys.
And Emily.
Hi.
So, Quechua is an indigenous language with most spoken around South America, and it's had a rather interesting revival quite lately. According to a report by the NPR in America last year, this decade there's been a particular modern interest in language that had always been traditionally quite maligned, always seen as an uneducated language in many Spanish-speaking South American countries. It started to come back in the sort of 2020s through trap, rap, quite youth-friendly genres. It seems to have really taken off this decade because of Renata Flores. She's a singer, and in 2015 she covered The Way You Make Me Feel by Michael Jackson in Quechua. It went viral on TikTok during the pandemic, and here's a bit. And Flores' aim was really to make, and I quote, to make our ancestral language El Quechua valuable again. So, rather than merely being make Quechua great again, it puts indigenous communities at the centre in a new way. Quechua also seems to have given rise to a new subgenre, exemplified by Lenin Tamayo, and he's infused Quechua's language and the rhythmical style of it into Korean beats and sort of like K-pop, quite 2010 sort of thing, and started to make Quechua start with stage presence. And that's always seems to have sparked a whole genre of its own, called Q-pop. Now he mixes these Quechua elements, quite traditional patterns, clothing, in his music videos. He has quite denim jeans, denim jacket, very quite western, but mixed with sort of Quechua patterns and styles and knitted things, and it feels quite punk, quite bohemian. It really gives rise to a new sort of style. But that also raises a bit of a question. Does it devalue the culture that it's actually coming from? Or is it just turning itself into something different? And I think it's probably the latter, and that's not always a bad thing. Of course, this is a podcast on plurilingualism, the idea of multiple languages coexisting in a society, almost merging the sort of Spanish vocab with Quechua choruses, for example, as he does. It's been quite positively received. You know, the YouTube comments, things, oh my god, I'm from Canada, I'm from France, I'm from UK, whatever country. I never even heard of Quechua before learning it, and now we're going to learn it all and start a whole project on it. It's like, so you go. There is also a few questions that have been raised by a couple of other commentators about whether mixing Quechua with Spanish, is it just using Quechua as an exhibition? And does that actually help or even hinder the sort of revival effort of a language and making it a bit more prestigious, a bit more socially acceptable than it once was? And I'd even argue it's probably just exercising good old plurilingualism. Mixing two languages. Like on TV, you get subtitles and the programme goes out in one language. There's recently been in Peru, there's been a news programme which does that. The presenters speak Quechua. First world programmes really embrace it. And the lower thirds, they're called in the business, the graphics, they're all in Spanish. So it helps the people to really understand the plurilingualism of Peru and understand Quechua a bit more and make it not seem so scary, really uneducated just for the common people. Yes,
yeah, I think it's an important point as well. We've given sort of a bit of background on Quechua because it's a minority language you may not have heard of before. I think an important point, sort of looking at its background and its kind of heritage, is that it's not always socially acceptable to use Quechua. There's been sort of cases of activists in sort of the law sector and social media and music, as we're going to talk about, sort of pop culture, to try and make that breakthrough, because there's sort of a long-standing idea that Quechua is not used in every situation, even by people who can speak it fluently, by native Quechua speakers that can also speak Spanish and have a good command over the language will actively choose to use Spanish in some cases, not teach their children, and so that language is sort of lost. So hence that sort of need for revitalization that we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, I think lots of Indigenous people have said that they maybe feel embarrassed to use Quechua because of the stigma and the negative perceptions associated with their language. So things like using Quechua in online and in music could maybe really help to change that in the future.
Yeah, and I think that's really a key, is understanding the fact it had quite low prestige, wasn't traditionally the language of choice. And now I think since the 2010s, you see a lot more effort going into the revival. Teach Quechua to children to help them understand when people are speaking on the streets. And people casually drop a bit of Quechua into an average conversation. Even when speaking in Spanish, it's the most obvious thing to do.
Yeah.
They're still dropping that little piece of the fragments of Quechua in that, just little in jokes, which kind of make it quite nice.
It seems like an art of knowing when to use Quechua. It's sort of a giveaway, I suppose. I mean, I don't know any myself, but just from sort of looking at a few articles and things, you kind of give yourself away when you are and aren't able to use Quechua. Like, not knowing Quechua, people might make jokes about you in Quechua, even if they're sort of Spanish speaker predominantly, because they know you won't understand. But then it's not necessarily the language of choice in maybe education and work, more formal settings.
Yeah, and even in, for example, the music industry, there are lots of really well-known Spanish-speaking artists. For example, Rosalia, who's a really famous Spanish singer who's well-known in lots of countries throughout the world. But no one really knows any artists who sing in Quechua. But, I mean, this could be changed, for example, with the rise in popularity of Quechua, for example, on social media, and how artists like Renata Flores became really popular on YouTube with her covers of songs, and also having released original songs with lots of different musical influences from genres like hip-hop, as well as using traditional Indigenous instruments and really drawing from her own culture. The popularity of Quechua songs can perhaps help to challenge this stereotype of Quechua being just a language of the past that's not relevant to the modern world anymore. And it can be really important for lots of people due to the history of it, lots of discrimination against Indigenous people in Latin America. For example, during the 1980s and 90s, there was a war and violence in Peru when many Indigenous Quechua speakers were killed. And also, since then and even today, there have been lots of stigma to do with Quechua, and the use of the language has been discouraged. So that led to also in the 90s an increase in Quechua music. For example, a band called Uchpa was formed, which is a Quechua rock band. And that was sort of seemed to be the beginning of a revival of Quechua in music and the aim to make it more popular.
Yeah, and I think that's important, isn't it, to kind of give people a reason to learn the language and sort of do it in quite an informal way. Because another thing we've sort of looked into before in our classes and things is how the formally taught version of Quechua isn't necessarily identifiable to some people who sort of grew up speaking it. So I think, and on the point of like really strong attitudes and discrimination and things, it's really valuable to have that like reconnect. Say, even if, for example, parents hold their own shame around it and don't want to teach it their children, then a lot of these resources online are accessible and definitely aimed at the younger demographic, I'd say, so they can sort of access this language and reconnect with their heritage and things. So
yeah, definitely. So have you found any other examples, for example, on social media of this?
Yeah, I had a little look into what they call Quechua activism on social media. So I found
Have a nice little
yeah, bit of wordplay, yes. So I just found a few sort of examples of language activists on social media that kind of struck me. I had a kindergarten teacher and a Quechua Spanish teacher from Ayacucho in Peru called Yanira Chencho, I think it is. So I had a little look myself at her TikTok, which has over 100,000 followers. And she started a social media initiative with the name Start Dreaming in Quechua. I'm going to try to pronounce it. I think it's Muskuri, or we're going to go with that. So she just kind of posts a lot of videos teaching Quechua. So it kind of ranges from short things like songs, stories, everyday phrases, and then also things with a bit more of a serious tone, sort of addressing gender issues, negative attitudes specifically towards Quechua, sort of around discrimination and identity. And I think sort of opening up the comments like we talked about earlier kind of really struck me, because it seemed that 99% of people were expressing their support and liked seeing that sort of recognition, even if it's sort of just emojis or one or two words and things, as well as sort of educating people. I think it was really important and interesting that she was helping to destigmatize the ideas around Quechua about it being a language of maybe like less educated people, or sort of suggesting that they don't sort of have a command over Spanish if people choose to speak Quechua.
It's interesting you say that, because discussing recently with Peru in the 80s and 90s, the president at the time, Fujimori, he was horrible towards the indigenous communities. It's still quite a divisive topic in the country today. And it's lovely to see how social media has really helped to reverse that sort of stigma. And I think, you've mentioned short clips with subtitles. I think that's quite a nice way to get people into the language. And you see all videos like Instagram and TikTok and what have you, seem to have subtitles on these days, like with captions. So it's definitely an interesting way to use this slightly new fad.
Yeah, I think it makes it quite accessible to people who maybe have sort of lost a bit of command of that language, and that kind of ties into the idea of sort of identity, especially with minority languages, not being directly related to sort of level of proficiency of the languages, just sort of thinking through whatever means of heritage, like through family or things, wanting to identify and feel like it's a part of yourself rather than sort of a skill you have. I feel like that's definitely an important thing. I also found a Facebook page with 113,000 followers, which I've never heard of that on Facebook. And that was based around translating news into Quechua, and some songs as well. It was quite mixed media, which was nice, maybe to target the sort of, not to disrespect anyone, maybe a bit of the older generation who tend to prefer Facebook, sort of my parents I'm thinking of right now. And then, I also looked
But make sure we don't give them a link.
Oh, yeah, no. Hopefully don't find this, sorry, Mum. And then, I also looked at some parallel examples outside of the Spanish-speaking world and outside of Quechua, because sort of we mentioned the concept of plurilingualism earlier in this episode, being on minority languages such as Quechua. So it's important to think about this concept not just tied to the Quechua example. It's happening, all over the world, that people who are speaking minority languages that have been marginalised over the years, sort of, they've been revitalised and things. And even thinking of it's like multilingualism, so different languages being spoken in a community, and plurilingualism, them being used in different ways, sort of as more of a functional thing, rather than, saying I have this level of this language and a different level of another, kind of just how they integrate and facilitate different kind of interactions, rather than just being, I don't know, something to put on your CV. Yes, I can speak Quechua. Yes, I can speak.
And that's kind of really what plurilingualism is. Even though I got that GCSE in French years ago, but I can barely remember. I can only know bonjour.
Yeah, but that's a greeting. It gets you somewhere.
Gets you somewhere.
And that is the sort of the nature of it, like you said, that it can take you somewhere, even if you think like, oh, that was years ago, I don't remember it, I don't know how to say this or this, but really, could you have an interaction or greet someone, order some food or something? It's that kind of being able to switch between languages that is a really cool thing to be able to do. But yeah, I just wanted to mention a couple of examples. Oh gosh, this one's even harder to pronounce. This is an account from a TikTok and Instagram account with over 6 million followers actually. So I was quite surprised to find that.
Kunya poranga tatuyo.
Yeah, we'll go with that. Sounds good to me. The person who's created this account are from the Tatuyo people in the Amazon, and their content slightly different. Maybe it is sort of educational, but I think it's not as direct, I suppose, because it's more videos of her everyday life, sort of showing community traditions. I think I watched her do a what I eat in the day or show some of her meals earlier on, one of which had a larvae in it, and I thought, as I opened the comments, bit of mixed reaction on that. I thinking, oh no. And then also some videos teaching her mother tongue. So yeah, I think it's really important for sort of authentic content to come, because I think that is an important thing with music. That's the good thing. Sort of social media is so great because people to be able to digitalize a language and share authentic experience. So it's not just an online course and you go and forget about it. There's connection to the real people who speak it and sort of that real sort of feeling to it. But I did see that she also did some viral dance trends. So I'm thinking, is there that need to conform a little bit to, for sort of popularity and things? And like we were saying earlier, is there sort of a balance to be had? Is there should you be conform to some ideas? Is it acceptable to mix, and to what degree? And that kind of thing. I also found a lady who's an Aboriginal from Australia. So the Aboriginal Australian people mainly occupied northwestern Australia and have sort of deep connection to the sea. So just very briefly looked at this. So she's a Bardi elder. Bardi is an Aboriginal group, as I've mentioned, and she is an author, barrister, and she also has TikTok and Instagram, and she has an Ask Auntie segment to address questions about Indigenous culture and languages. So yeah, I think that's sort of bridging that gap with sort of misconceptions maybe, or lack of knowledge, because I think a lot of time like hostility towards like minority languages and things like that, it's sort of fear of the unknown and kind of thing, and it can feel quite vulnerable if you don't pick up what someone else is saying, for example. And then in extreme cases of like severe linguistic attitudes, when like Franco and things, he wanted just Castilian.
Tienes español, hablas español.
Yeah, exactly. Sort of the repression of sort of other languages. So it's nice to sort of connect and promote the use of these languages. So yeah, I think the examples I've just talked about, I've also got Elva Ambia, who is a Quechua native speaker from Huancavelica in Peru. She migrated to New York City and co-founded the Quechua Collective of New York. So she ended up doing workshops, children's books, and cultural events. So I think that really speaks to the different forms that sort of language activism can take. A lot of it I've noticed that I've looked at seems to be geared towards the younger generation, but hey, we've got the Facebook warriors, all 114,000 of them. So that's a great thing. And
that's no bad thing. Getting the youth involved.
Yeah, I think they are a big mobiliser in sort of change and the preservation of the language. But I can imagine there's plenty of sort of adults and elders out there that would appreciate feeling that recognition of the language and maybe if they've lived through that personal first-hand experience of repression. And I don't know, it's a nice thought to think it could still change their ideas sort of later on in life. I don't know. I know we often think of adults as like less impressionable, I suppose, but no, I think definitely sort of brings everyone together. But yes, I think that might be all we have for today. So thank you for listening, and make sure to tune in to our next episode of the Linguapop podcast, which will be French-based.
Que bien.
Wait,
that was Spanish.
Oh my gosh. Was it meant to be French there? Do you all want to sign off?
We called it Plurilingualism. We always get languages mixed up.
Oh, okay. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.
Bye bye.
Bye.